Seema Kenny, who's going to be talking about starting your genealogy. She does have a number of different topics about genealogy, but we figured this one, starting here, would be the best way. It's kind of starting from scratch. Just want to remind you that Walpole Media is filming today, so you won't be seen. But if you have any questions, make sure you raise your hand so Seema will bring the microphone over to you so we can hear it come off in the recording. Okay, so here's Seema. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and thank you all for showing up. It was a nice drive to get over here, so I'm happy to be here. It's nice to do this in person for a change after the last year and a half. So I already answered this question a little earlier, but for those of you that weren't here, I do bill myself as a professional genealogist, although most of what I do is lecturing. I don't do a lot of research for other people, which is probably what you expect when you hear the term professional genealogist. And the reason I don't do a lot of research for other people is because it doesn't sit well in my stomach to do a lot of looking up and then have to charge somebody and say, but I didn't find anything. And it's not that I'm not entitled to it, but it just doesn't sit with my personality. So it's fine if I can create a nice big book for you and say, oh, I found all this stuff, and then put a bill on the top of it. That I don't mind that, but putting the bill on top of something that says I looked 25 places and found nothing isn't really my cup of tea. So I like to write books. I've written 5 or 6 family history books already, similar to the one you showed me. Between my family and my husband's family. And I love to share the knowledge that I have, so I like to do the lectures. So I live in Upton, not too far. My contact information is on your handouts, so please feel free to email me or call me with questions. I don't mind answering. I don't mind sharing resources that I have, as long as I'm allowed by the speaker to share them. So always keep in mind that when the speaker gives you information, it's under their copyright, and you're not supposed to be sharing it, and you're not supposed to take pictures of people's PowerPoint presentations and all that nice kind of stuff that we all learned about in kindergarten, right? Behave, respect other people, all those things that were on our report cards. So let's start talking about starting your own genealogy. First of all, how many of you have all started? Okay, so we've got some beginners and we've got some maybe intermediate, maybe even advanced researchers in the room, who knows? So I maintain, and of course I have to maintain this because why else would I do this, but I maintain that doing this is the best gift you can ever give your family. First of all, who else is interested? I have 3 boys. They could, well, I can't say they could care less. They care about different parts. One likes maps, one likes stories, and the other one likes pictures. So I can satisfy all 3 of them, but nobody's jumping up and saying, yes, Mom, I'm taking your, file cabinets full of stuff. They haven't even read the books I've written yet. But on the other hand, they haven't thrown away the books either, so that's good. But, we need to research. We need to research while records still exist, before the tombstones are broken, turned over, whatever. The graveyards are used for God knows what. Somebody's going to decide at some point that our graveyard should be like European ones, where you rent the plot for so many years, and after that you're dug up and somebody else is put there. That means all the gravestones keep changing, so how are you ever going to find great-grandma if she's been replaced by somebody else's great-grandma? So even the littlest bit of this that you can accomplish, and it's not to say that you can't accomplish a lot, but even doing the littlest bit is a wonderful gift for your family. Just remember to leave it where they can find it. Marked, important. Don't throw it away. Don't leave it in the brown box full of other crappy paper that they're going to look at and go, oh, put that in the recycle bin and, lose everything. Donate it to a library even. So we're going to talk today about the 2 forms that are most common in genealogy. And then we're going to talk also about how to do some research, and then also how to keep educated on all the many facets of genealogy, because unfortunately, this is not one of those things where you can say, oh, step 1, you do this, and step 2, you go do that, because we all have different interests. And some of us want to look at houses, and some of us want to look at cars, and other of us want to look at clothing styles and furniture styles and different things. So all of those come from different types of records. So there's no easy thing to say, oh yeah, first you start here and then you go to this record and then that record, because we're going to jump all over the place, right? And we're not even going to keep doing one ancestor, because we're going to find other ancestors that look even more interesting, and that's okay too. So what is genealogy to start with? We're talking about studying a community, not just a person, but a whole community sometimes, because one of the things we have to do is put this person, whether it's because we saw their picture on the wall and we got a name, so we know, oh, we have to research because this person's been hanging on the wall for 40 years, they must be important. We have to put them in the context of their family, of history. And oh my gosh, if their name is John Smith, we have to make sure we find the right John Smith, right? I think every one of us, whether you know it or not, there's a Smith in your family tree somewhere. I think I've got 3 or 4 of them already, and I usually stop. When I see Smith, I don't go any further. I'll leave that for another day when I have more energy, which I probably will never get to, but we'll see. But in order, with those common names, and just because Smith, Jones, Browns, and White are common in the US doesn't mean that your surname isn't very common wherever it came from, right? I've run into that where I go to England and find out, oh my God, they can spell Ellis 14 different ways. I mean, it's only 5 letters. How many times can you change these letters, right? And there's thousands of them. So I haven't done much on the Ellises either. But we want to get that biography because that's how we're going to know that our John Smith was a baker and not a blacksmith or some other, thing, anything we can use, again, to make sure we're getting the right person. There's nothing worse than researching a whole family and finding out they're not yours. I mean, it's great, you learned lessons, you did all the hard work, but oh, please write it up or do something else to share it. Don't just throw it away and go, oh no, they're not my people anymore. Because, you should get credit for doing the work you did. So we're going to study a community. Certainly, if you get back into the 1700s in the U.S., you're probably going to end up like I did. I have ancestors that were in Lancaster, Massachusetts. Well, at the time, Lancaster took up what's now 14 different towns. It was huge. But there were only like 12 families. Of course, every one of them had 17 children. So who do you think the kids all married? Well, I'm going to marry this family, and they're going to marry that family. So you have to study the whole town because you're related to the whole freaking town one way or another. So it is going to study a community of some sort, at least at some level. Maybe even just a neighborhood if you're from a bigger city, but, at least some area of the community. So why are we getting started? Well, for me, it was curiosity. My grandmother is one of 8 children. And my great-grandparents were, God bless them, still alive when I was born. So we used to go to great-grandma and great-grandpa's house a lot. They lived next door to the YMCA where we took swimming lessons. So we'd go over and great-grandma would always, oh, that's your cousin, I'm like, how can all these freaking people be my cousin? Well, because they had 8 children, each of whom had at least 2, if not 3 or 4 kids. And those all had kids, and we're all at great-grandma's house. Because out of her 8 children, 6 of them still lived within probably 20 miles of their house. So people were there all the time. And she's always, oh, that's your cousin, that's your cousin. Well, I got curious, like, how can these people all be my cousins? I had to figure it out, even when I was little. Only that one family, though. My father's side was easier. I only had 4 cousins, and I never saw them, so no curiosity. Some of you may decide you're doing this for medical reasons. Your kids may have asked you to do it. My son had just had a baby this year, and when they went for their pediatrician's office visit, the first thing they said was, oh, Mom, we need the medical history. Can you tell us how, who's got what diseases in the family and all this, because the pediatrician wants to know. Yeah, okay, I don't know why your doctor never asked, but okay, I'll fill it out for the pediatrician. It's important to answer those 3 pages of questions they give you accurately, right? Do you have any history of all these freaking diseases that we don't even know what they are? Maybe you've got one of those princess stories. You know, grandma married or grandpa married an Indian princess. Everybody in New England seems to think they have Indian princesses somewhere in their family. Or some other story about, oh, George Washington passed by our house, you know, whatever. You might want to research and figure out if that's really true. Maybe you just want something pretty to put on your wall. Or maybe you think you might be an heir to something and you want to get a claim on it. Wouldn't you love to end up with a castle in Ireland or something where you could claim, like, those 3 bricks belong to me, you know? I'd love that. I have no Irish history, but they have beautiful castles over there. It doesn't matter why you're getting started. What matters is that you're getting started or have started. So let's take a look at the 2 forms that you're going to find in your genealogy research. Now, whether you fill these out or you find them in a library doesn't matter, because these forms have been around for 200 years plus. So you will find them, if you go into Boston to the New England Historical Genealogical Society, you will find these kind of forms handwritten from hundreds of years ago in their library. You need to understand the form so you can understand what you're reading. I have given you in your handout, I've given you 2 copies of a pedigree chart and 2 copies of the family group chart, which is, or family group sheet, which is the other one we're going to talk about. Now, I did that so if you want to take notes on one today, you still have a blank one when you get home and you can make copies of it. If you can't find the copies or you need more copies, whatever, you can download it from my website or probably about 50 other websites if you want. So a pedigree chart, you probably filled one of these out in somebody's baby book or for a school project maybe, right? We're going to start with what I've labeled a focus person. So for discussion, the focus person is going to be ourself. All right, we're going to write down our own name. So the focus person could be male or female. We won't know till we figure out who we're using. And then, of course, we're going to add their parents. And if we know anything, we're going to add their grandparents, if we know it. And after that, we're going to add their great-grandparents. And that's usually about all that fits on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. All right? Now, if you write like my mother, microscopic letters, you could fit a lot more on an 8.5 by 11 page, but nobody can read it. So we do have to think about somebody has to read our handwriting, somebody has to be able to do this. If you're storing it on the computer, you don't have to worry about filling out the form because the computer's going to make the form for you. But if you're not comfortable with the computer, do it on paper, keep it in a notebook. I know plenty of genealogists that do that, and they just have big fat notebooks with all kinds of charts. What a treasure trove for their descendants when they come find it. So, a couple things about the pedigree chart. You might notice, now I color-coded, right? The men are in blue, the women are in pink. So if you look, you might notice that the father is always above the person that they're father to. The mother is always below. If it's numbered, which they're not always, but if it's numbered, the men are always going to have an even number and the women are going to have an odd number. Now again, if this is nicely typed because it came off a computer, it's not going to matter. But if you find an old handwritten one, you're going to want to understand how these things relate. In addition to the names, we're going to want to put in information about birth, marriage, and death. The 3 things that we assume can happen to every ancestor, right? We pray they were born. We make an assumption, sociologically, that they were married. Not always a good assumption, but we assume that they got married. And we're pretty sure that they're not alive anymore. At least, certainly, great-grandparents are not, alive anymore. So we're going to look for birth, marriage, and death. We're going to look for when did those happen and where did they happen. And when we write down where it happened, we're going to write down not just the town, but the county and the state. Because no matter what we learned in high school or grammar school about the map of the United States, it changed as recently as the 1930s. All right, some of you might even have been alive when it last changed. I won't make any guesses. But, 1930s is really not all that long ago, especially if we're talking about genealogy, where we're trying to find people in the 17 and 1600s. So we do want to pay attention to what does it say for the state, the county, and the town, because there's a good chance that between the time it happened and now, the borders have changed. I really need to put this on, well, it is on my to-do list, but I need to move it up higher. There's a town, I believe it's somewhere in West Virginia, that area today, that obviously the town has never picked up and moved, but it's been in 4 different states. Well, if you have to research in that town, you darn well better know what state it was in at what time you're researching, or you're going to be looking in the wrong haystack for the needle. And I refuse to look in a haystack for a needle unless I know the needle's in there somewhere, right? So I want to be careful about where do I need to look based on the time that my ancestor was there and where that town or county was at the time. So in addition to that, on the pedigree chart, there's 2 other things that I'm going to want to fill in. One is to fill in, usually it's somewhere towards the top, there's something that says chart number. Well, if it's the beginning and you're starting on your focus person, it's probably chart number 1, right? But what happens when you do your research? Now, the first one that I worked on was where'd my little thing, it won't show up. I worked on number 5 there, my paternal grandmother, and she goes back, her family goes back into the 1600s, all in the United States. I got 10 generations without ever leaving the country. Well, I can't fit them all on this piece of paper, right? So I'm going to need another pedigree chart. I'm going to need to have another one that connects up numbers 10 and 11 with all those other generations that I found. So if I'm going to have multiple charts, and it won't apply on this one, but there is a note at the bottom, and I'll show you on the next slide how it works. Person number 1 on this chart is the same as person number with a blank on chart and a blank, so that you can connect them. So let me show you my example. So if I had done great-grandpa number 8 there, I think that's a Gustav on my family chart, and I knew more people from his background, I would have a second chart. And at the bottom it would say person number 1 on this is the same as person number 8 on chart number 1. And after I get too many of those charts, if I lived in Walpole, I'd be calling Debbie and say, is anything going on? Because I need the big floor in the big room so I can lay all my charts out and see what's going on. Even just the stage area would be good. Just get it all on so I can really see what's going on. Where are all my holes, right? Any questions on the pedigree chart? Like I said, computers will make this for you, and you have blanks so you can fill them in, or you'll find them in a library, on a napkin, chicken scratched from grandma or whatever. Always nice finds, because I love to watch people, see how people did their handwriting. And it's always amazing when I find these people that were very prominent citizens, and then I find out they couldn't sign their own name. They're like the biggest business leader in town, but all their documents are signed with an X. I always thought that was just like something they made up for TV, right? All right, so if we've done pedigree charts, anybody notice who's missing off of a pedigree chart? Who did you say? Grandmother. Well, your grandmother's on there. Because your grandmother's going to be either number 7 or number 5, right? But how many of you have siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins? Aren't they considered part of your family? But they don't fit on this chart. That's why we have another chart that we use a lot more, right? So we have another chart called a family group sheet. So the family group sheet, this is where you start to get your family involved. You don't even have to do all the work, see? I'm going to make it easy for you. So here's a sheet where we're going to put mom and dad's name. If you have one of those families like my husband, where they keep naming the son after the father, after the grandfather, it does help to have the grandparents' names at the top, because then you can kind of keep track of what generation you're looking at, because the father's always Joseph Francis Kenny. We've got 5 in a row in his family. Somehow, none of the kids this time went and named anybody after that, so we've kind of eliminated it for a little while. But the grandparents are a help when you've got those kind of situations. So here we're going to list a mother and a father and all their children. Well, if we go back and look at a pedigree chart, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 couples on a pedigree chart. That means if we took the names off the first pedigree chart, we're going to have 9 family group sheets. Right? Because we want to know for each grandma and grandpa all the kids that they had. And for some of those, we might need multiple sheets if they had these, anywhere from 16 to 20 children, like some of my ancestors did. And yes, you will find ancestors that use the same name over and over because the baby died and they just wanted to use that name. It's going to pop up. I have one couple that used the name Abraham 3 times because dad was determined there was going to be an Abraham Jr. Took him 3 tries to get one, but okay, it's going to happen. That's why we pay attention to dates, right? So here's where we're going to list all the children. We're going to put down their birth date. We're going to put down information on this chart of when did they marry, who did they marry. You may find a group sheet that even has a column for what's their death date. Right? So that we're trying to keep things compact. Now, again, if you're doing this all on the computer will print this for you, but you still have to enter all the information. So we do want to go find all those brothers and sisters of everybody. So my family group sheet is easy. There's only me and my sister, so I don't have much to fill in. So I put up here surnames, all right? So I've got my father and my mother, me and my sister. I didn't ask her, so I didn't put her surname up there, but she did get married. I know when we're born. Neither one of us have died yet, so I can leave that spot blank. Why do I want all the spouses' names? Well, for one thing, it was, at some point in my lifetime, very common for women to change their name, right? So if I've got a family with a lot of daughters, I need to know who they married because they're going to have changed their last name and I need to be able to find them under their new name. You know who else I need to find under that daughter's husband's name? Grandma, when she becomes a widow, right? Because where does grandma go to live? She goes to live with one of her kids. If you don't know all the kids' last names, you're not going to find grandma. She's going to be among the missing. Or maybe grandpa, depending, but usually it's grandma, right? So we need this information. We need all the children's information because at some point we're going to have to look at those names. They may not be the focus of our research if we're researching our direct ancestors, but that's up to you. You get to decide, what do I want to research? Is it just my direct ancestors, or do I want to write one of those really big, thick books, like, thank God, one of my cousins wrote, all the descendants of the immigrants. Oh, don't take that on now. It's way too big of a project. You don't want to have to deal with that unless you have very recent immigrants. But, it's wonderful to go in a library and you find that really thick book. I found one, it's about 3 inches thick, about the Sawyer family. And those are my Lancaster ancestors. It's like, oh, this is great. Yep, Thomas, William, Barnabas, Lucy. And then Lucy, girl, not in the Sawyer family anymore, so there's nothing more in the book for me. But I need all those brothers and sisters, too, to make sure I'm in that right family. If I want to get the whole family picture about how big the family was and why there's 400 people at the family reunion, I definitely need all of those brothers and sisters and all their children and maybe their grandchildren. in order to name everybody who's in an old photograph or something. Right? Totally up to you. The best recommendation I can give you if you're just getting started is to, before you even start, put a fence up that says, this is who I want to research. Because it's very easy to get caught in, oh, well, they had 14 children and I better know everything about all 14 children. And before you know it, you're on like, oh, well, this child who had 3 marriages, and you're looking up the second spouse's in-laws and all this other stuff that really doesn't have a direct line to your family. But boy, was it fun. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you haven't slept. You know, so put up a fence and tell yourself, for this period of time, I am only going to look at direct ancestors. I'm only going to look at people that I actually know. Maybe you want to research those aunts and uncles that you grew up with first, because you know how it goes. You only know them as, at the time, the old people, right? You were little kids, they were older. You don't necessarily know what their childhood was like. Maybe you want to research that. Go for it. Pick something and just stick with that for a little while. Then let yourself broaden that fence and go for more and more people. Any questions on the family group sheet? Again, you have 2 of these in your packet. Yes. Wait, I have to bring you the microphone.
Oh boy, don't give her the mic. Please don't give her the mic.
I didn't say I was going to give it, just bring it over.
Hi, what if there's multiple marriages to one sister or something?
Okay, so,
In my case, it would be me.
yes, people that got married multiple times, they're going to have multiple group sheets, right? Because the basis of a group sheet is the mother and father, the ones that are up here in this kind of pinkish, coralish thing. So if somebody's married multiple times, you're going to have multiple sheets with their name on it, one with each spouse, and you're going to be keeping track of which children go with which parents, right? That's important. We had a question earlier before we started about DNA. That kind of thing is extremely important if you're using DNA to solve a mystery. You need to know which kids went with which parents, because they're either going to be full relations or they're going to be half relations. And that makes a big difference if you're trying to do this with your DNA. But we'll leave that for a whole nother time. I don't want to confuse you, because that's a whole confusing topic all on its own. Okay, so you've written down what you know, because that's the best way to start. Write down what you know. If it turns out later that what you know is not right, just accept that somebody didn't like celebrating their birthday in the winter and they told you it was always in the summer so they could have a nice outdoor picnic. That's okay. They may literally not have known their actual birthday. They may have just thought, well, it's always nicer to picnic in the summer than have a birthday in January where, you know, we live in New England and it's snowy and crappy. But write down what you know and then work to find the documents that are going to tell you that what you know is accurate, okay? So we want to start by looking for documents. We want to find birth, marriage, and death certificates, birth, marriage, and death announcements from the newspaper, right? Because they tend to have pictures. Yay! Except, of course, the people who die at 80 and they put in a picture when they were 20. I'm like, okay, but really, like, how am I supposed to recognize this person? We may later look for photographs, newspapers. Write down, if it's people you know, write down your memories. Your memories about that person are way more personal than anything you're going to find in an archive or a library or anything. So write down that, oh, great-grandma, oh, she was a great cook, and I'd love to go to her house because you could always smell something baking or, you know, whatever it is. Write that down because it's not going to be anywhere else for your descendants to find. But let's take a look. Here's some documents from my family. These are all from Maine, birth, marriage, and death. Yep, wouldn't you be excited to find that one about Ichabod? Here's his name and the date he died. Thank you. At least they saved that much. You see at the top it says it's a copy of an old record. The record was deteriorating. They were nice enough to fund a project where they would copy the old ones that were falling apart. They just decided they didn't have to copy the whole thing. They only had to copy the names and the dates. But it's better than nothing. Better than nothing, I'll take it. But, you know, it might have been nice to make a note like the whole thing was ruined and they couldn't read the rest or whatever. Different amounts of information depending on what kind of document you have and depending on where you get it from. Now, before you go looking for these, in case you have to research outside of New England, because, you know, New England, we've been around forever. I can go to the library and I can look up things from the Pilgrims and literally find documents from the 1600s. If you have to research outside New England, the first thing I recommend that you do is go to that state's website and look at the Secretary of State's page. Find out when they started to require that births be recorded. Okay, I don't know why I picked on this state, but something must have been in the news. I did it. I picked on Kansas. I went and looked one day before a lecture. Kansas did not require a birth certificate registration until 1906. Now, when you've been looking at them from the 1700s, 1906 is like yesterday. So don't go looking for something that doesn't exist, okay? If your ancestor was born in Kansas in 1900, don't look for a birth certificate because it's not there. You're going to have to think of another place to get their birth date, probably a church record, or any of the other forms that, you know, they filled out in their lifetime, because how many times have you written down your birth date on a form since you entered kindergarten? We won't count them because we can't count that high, right? So we have to sometimes come up with alternate options. Now, if you're lucky, you find a real pretty document that maybe you want to do something with. This is the family Bible that my cousin happened to have, and she was nice enough to send me a copy of it. I'd love to know whose handwriting is in those first two columns because it's gorgeous. Look how nice and neat and even and perfect. Yeah, you think somebody actually wrote it? Do you think they took it to a printer? I'm a little suspicious, right? The stuff in the last two columns, that's handwriting. The copy I got is in color, it's in different colors, it's in different inks. It probably was written at the time the events happened. The first two columns look like they were all written at the same time. It makes me more suspect of the accuracy of those first two columns, maybe not the names, because I think somebody could get the names right, but the dates. You know, if the person who printed this, whether they literally did it at a printer or they hand wrote it, they could have made a mistake, right? I still have to verify this, but it's a gorgeous document, and it's the kind of document that when I find it and, oh, I need a gift for somebody, maybe it's the kind I put on a tote bag or I put it on a mouse pad or something like that because it's a pretty document. So where am I going to look for these things? The first place you're going to look is in your own house. Pull out all the scraps of paper that you've saved over the years, the box you brought home from mom's house that you still haven't gone through. You have birth announcements. Maybe not the newspaper, but maybe the little, you know, our baby has arrived kind of things. You have obituary cards. You have wedding invitations. All those things count. You don't have to be going into dusty basements. Well, you will eventually have to go into a dusty basement to find these things, but look in your own home first. Look at all the things that you've saved over the years, whether they're in a scrapbook or they're in a box, whatever. You probably have a lot more than you thought you did, whether it's documents or photographs or whatever. And then ask your family members. Oh, and I knew there was something I forgot to mention when we were talking about the family group sheet. If you need help, that family group sheet is a wonderful thing to write your sibling's name and their spouse on it, send them a copy and say, I'm getting started on family history. Would you fill this in for me? Make them give you the information. Then you make a note at the bottom about this was filled out by the actual mother or father, whoever, did it or something like that. And I have this nasty habit, because I have a nasty prediction of the future here. I like to write down, if I'm making a note about anybody that I've talked to who's live, or anyone who's given me information live, I make a note and I put next to it, they were not medicated at the time. Because I'm convinced that my great-grandchildren are going to look back on the early 2000s in the newspapers, and they're going to think we all had dementia, and they're going to wonder how much medication we were taking every day. And I want them to know I was of perfectly, as they say, sound mind and body when I wrote this information, or the person who gave it to me was of sound mind and body when I took it. But ask your family to help, right? You find an old photograph. Don't talk to your siblings and cousins about the weather and all the medical issues. I feel old because I've been doing that all year, talking all about my medical issues. Bring an old picture. What do you remember about this party? Can you tell me who the people are in the picture? Get a real conversation going and get their memories. Everything I ask my sister about, if I say it was white, she tells me it was black. I know we grew up in the same house, but boy, do we have totally different perspectives on our family history. It's always good to get somebody else's perspective. And we'll talk about some of these other places that you can do some research as well. Right? A local historical society. They have information. Maybe it doesn't come from your parents or your family, but maybe it comes from a family who was very similar. Maybe the local historical society has something that would be the same, the way people farmed here as the way people farmed in Iowa or Illinois or wherever it is that you're researching, right? People do things pretty much the same everywhere. We just have to figure out which method they may have used. But they have photographs, they have ephemera. I have a long-standing family up in one of the towns in Maine. I swear I could find a family member in almost every single thing that the Historical Society has. I found my great-grandmother's program from when she graduated high school. Class of 6 people. But they all graduated from the one-room schoolhouse. That's precious. And you're not going to find it, just any place. So look at these old places. If you look them up, and I have to admit, most of them, they're only open a few hours a week. If the hours don't fit your schedule, call them, email them, send them a postcard. I would like to visit, but I cannot meet your schedule, right? The first one I wanted to go to was up in Bolton. They were only open on Thursday afternoons from 2 to 4. Well, thank you. If you work, that doesn't do you any good at all, right? Unless you can take a day off. So you write, you tell them, I'd like to come in 2 weeks. Or I'm planning to visit in the area, next summer. Could somebody be there on such and such a date? And oh, by the way, I am researching the XYZ family. If you tell them why you're coming, there's a good chance there'll be a stack of materials on the table when you get there. I have heard stories of people who have told the Historical Society, yes, I'm coming and this is why, and they're greeted by long-lost cousins they never knew they had, because they still live in the area. What better way is there to get information about your family that lived in the area than meeting a cousin who still lives there? Maybe still lives in the family home. Could be a whole big adventure. So check them out. Check out the local library. Remember, part of what you're doing for your family history is history. Look at history books. Look at local histories, town histories, county histories, state histories. Get a feel for what was going on in the area where your ancestors lived at the time they lived there. Librarians love to give you all this information. And I'll tell you, one of the easiest ways to get some of that information, especially if you're ready to jump the pond and you need to learn about another country, go to the kids section. I think I've taken out every book our library has on another foreign country from the kids section, because it tells you very quickly about their government, their customs, their holidays, and a little bit of their history. You can read it in like 30 minutes, Who needs to read the encyclopedia article? First of all, it's written in teeny tiny print. Kids' books are in big print. They're not labeled large print, but they are bigger print than adult books, right? Make it easy on yourself. Use what makes sense for what you need to do. But libraries may also have yearbooks. What's in a yearbook? Pictures, right? The notes about what clubs they belong to, what teams they were on. What did grandma do before she was a grandma? Oh, she was on the bowling team. Oh, she was in band. Never knew because, of course, by the time she's a grandma, she's not playing the clarinet anymore or whatever it is. So, get that information while you can get it. Town clerk or the town assessor. Those are great places to try. Don't go when they're having an election. But, go in on other days, ask them what records they have, what's available for you to look at. They may not be in a very nice order. A lot of old records in the town clerks, they tend to be in alphabetical order. Now that's nice if you're looking it up. Or they'll be in street order. You have to know where somebody lived. So you may have to look through 100 pages to find the page you want, but you know what? I'll take that 100 pages over not knowing. So I'll look through a bunch of dusty books and whatever to see what I can find. Land records. If your ancestors own land in Massachusetts, I'll only say it for Massachusetts because I'm much more comfortable with it, you can look up land records in Massachusetts back to the 1700s. They're online, they're free. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing to look up, but you can look them up. You can find out what your ancestors paid for the land. How did they get the money to pay for it? Who did they buy it from? Maybe even where did they live when they bought the land? Because they may have lived in a different town that you don't know about before they bought that spot. Land records can tell you a lot of information about people. And probate records. Anybody who owned property, there's going to be a record in the probate court from when they died. If they owned real property, they had to do something to move, who was going to own it next. So real property being land. If you're really lucky, I know it won't seem like that if you find one, but wills are great, right? I leave to my son, and hopefully it says my son, my daughter, and all these kinds of names and things you can get. But you can get even more information from a document when somebody died without a will or intestate. Then you get an inventory. Imagine what it would be like if you, I don't mean to be gruesome, but if you die without a will, or your best friend does, and you get tagged with the task of, okay, I've got to go make an inventory of everything they own. And I mean everything. The number of forks, knives, spoons, how many toothbrushes, what kind of toothpaste. What would you do? Most of these people that had that task walked in the front door, maybe with a clipboard, maybe with who knows what to write on, and they went room by room. So as you read an inventory, you can get a feel of what their house looked like. Downstairs, upstairs. Then we have to go to the outbuildings, and you'll find out what tools they had, which might help you figure out what occupation they had. They're hard to read, lots of words that we don't understand anymore, don't use anymore, but a wealth of information. So don't give up just because somebody says, well, yeah, Grandpa owned a lot of land, but he died without a will. Say, yay, I'm going to go find the inventory. I have gone to the probate court and looked at documents from my family from the 16 and 1700s. They crumble in my hands, but they're there, and I have pictures of them, and that's all I care about because I got all the information off of them. So, the hard part that I'm not real good at, but I'm getting better. Writing down what you find and how you found it. Keep track of the books you used. Keep track of the names you looked up. All right? What did you find, or did you not find anything? make a note because, oh my God, there were a ton of Andersons in here, but I didn't find mine. Well, you know why? Because great-grandpa had 3 different names he used. And I kept looking up the wrong names. Okay? He lived in Maine, born and died in Maine. He worked in Boston. George Albert Anderson. I'll settle for George A. Anderson, whatever. I looked up George under GEO. I looked it up under 3 or 4 other abbreviations. Nope, can't find the man anywhere. When I took the birth certificates for his 5 children, all born in the 1800s, so they're all born at home, right? You don't have this born in a hospital and you still don't know where the person lived. They're born at home in Boston. Well, I took the address from the birth certificate. I went to the city directory. Oh my gosh, when he was in Boston, he was Albert George Anderson. Because what didn't they have? He didn't carry in his back pocket a photo ID. Our ancestors could be whoever they wanted to be, whenever they wanted to be. They could give any name, right? If they move to a new town, they can change their name. They don't require legal status or anything. They just change it. They just all of a sudden announce, this is my new name. Makes it hard to find them. But you need to keep track that, yes, I looked them up under this name. Well, if I had had the list of all the places I had looked up George Albert, I could have gone back and now looked up Albert George and seen maybe he was there and I didn't know it, right? Big mistake on my part, but one of these days I'll fix it. So keep track, even as you're doing web searching, which is a lot harder because it's so easy to click and go to the next web space, but try to keep some kind of a map. I went here, I found this, I looked in this record, I found or didn't find something based on names. So what are we going to look for on the web, right? We're stuck at home. Well, I hate to say it because it's kind of a nice day out there, but winter's coming. We're going to be stuck at home again, whether we want to be or not. Maybe with no masks, but we'll be stuck. Where am I going to look? Well, all the places we talked about researching are going to have websites. What they have on them is going to be dependent on the organization, right? Not every historical society is going to have the same kind of information on their website. But look, try them out. The state archives. We were having a discussion earlier about immigration, Ellis Island. They have millions of names on their website. Never the ones I want, but millions of names. Archives.gov for the National Archives, right? Federal documents. And that's another thing to keep track of is, do I want a state document? Do I want a federal document? Is it a local document I'm looking for? Make sure we're looking in the right places. LOC.gov is the Library of Congress. Absolutely gorgeous library there. If you ever go to Washington, take the time to get a researcher card. Don't just take the tour of the Library of Congress. Tell them you want to get a researcher card, and then you can walk in the middle where Nicolas Cage ran around, the circle part in the middle there. You can go down in the basement to their actual library and actually take books off the shelf and find things. It's so exciting to be in those buildings and do that. Genealogical societies. I mentioned at some point when I was talking about myself, I belong to like 6 of them. Unfortunately, I also have offices in like 4 of those 6. But get together with other people that are doing this. Find a society that focuses either on your geographical ancestry or your ethnic ancestry. I just did a virtual conference online that was all German ancestry. Some of the classes were in German. Thank God they put English subtitles so you could follow. But, sometimes you need that expertise. You need to talk to people that are doing the same types of research. And then, of course, we've got the big 4 research sites. If you've not started yet, my best hint, go to FamilySearch.org. It's free. Yes, they will ask you for your email and they will ask you to put in a password, but they will not charge you for anything. So go there and use it. They have a huge repository of documents that they get from around the world, right? They send people all around the world to photograph documents and then put them online. Wonderful, wonderful work that they do. You don't have to worry. It's disconnected from their missions. They're not going to come knocking on your door because you set up an account. You know, you can use their website. It's all free. I don't know how far it is from here because I came a roundabout way, but the Latter-day Saints church that I usually end up doing research at is in Franklin. Most of them have a little family history center, and that means they have an expert in there, they have computers in there, and they subscribe to databases. So before you decide you're going to spend money on Ancestry.com, why not go to one of them or to a library and use it for free for a little while? Make sure that there's something that you're going to get out of the money you're going to spend. And they have some much more obscure databases as well that you won't find everywhere. Ancestry, Find My Past, and My Heritage are all great sites, but think about what you're looking for, okay? Ancestry.com, of course you've heard of them because they're always advertising, right? You can't have a TV show on that pretty much that doesn't have an Ancestry commercial on it. They're expensive, I'll admit it. I mean, I pay them hundreds of dollars every year for my subscription, but I use it at least once a week, okay? Now, if you're using it at a library, because all three of these have library versions, go for it, use it at the library, but it is not the same as what you get if you pay for it. The biggest difference, if you use it at the library, you cannot build your own family tree. You can look at whatever records they offer for free, which is going to be anything federal government, state government, or local government, but you can't build a tree, and you may not get to see all the documents because every one of these companies has agreements with the places that they photograph the documents about what they can share and what they can't share. So you'll get some. It's better to use it for free and make some progress than not use it at all, but you may not get everything that you're looking for. Find My Past is a British company, so it's great if you're doing research on Great Britain, right? The empire where the sun never set and all of that. You need information on Australia, Ireland, England, Wales. Find My Past has a lot of it. It also has a lot of American records because they're no dummies. They figured out that Americans will spend money on this stuff, so they're putting it on their sites as well. My Heritage is out of Israel. It tends to have more European records, not just Eastern European, but just European in general. So think about what you're looking for. Make sure when you get a subscription and you're paying your good hard-earned money for something that it's going to pay off for you in the long run. Share a subscription with somebody. I didn't really say that out loud, did I? Oh gosh, I said it on camera too. But you know, if you need to, it gets expensive to have all these subscriptions. Save up the military research you need to do until you have enough of it to justify a subscription to a military website if you can't get it for free. You know, be realistic about what you can and can't afford. And this is a collaborative hobby. It's so much more fun if you can work with other people that are at least researching in the same location that you are, if not the same family. If you can drag a cousin in, you know, and say, oh, you do this part, I'll do that part. We'll come back and meet in 3 months and see what we found or whatever. All the better, right? But see if you can find a society. See if your local library, if they have a genealogy group that meets once a month. Sometimes they bring in speakers. Sometimes you just get together and you say, I checked out this new website and it was really great for A, B, and C. And you do like a 5-minute little presentation, just sitting around a table kind of thing. Look for seminars, things like this, where you can go to an hour presentation and learn something. You can do it in person now, thankfully. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them online these days because of everything we've gone through. Conferences. We have a great big conference in New England in the odd-numbered years. It's the New England Regional Genealogical Consortium, which means it's about 25 different genealogy societies, and we put on one conference every 2 years. 4 days, 1,000 people. It's huge, but we have a great time. We offer like 100 and something lectures. There's an exhibit hall, plenty of time to meet your cousins and find people that are researching your same ancestors and things. Newsletters, there's a lot of them out there that you can get. Even from the big companies, the Research Ancestry, Find My Past, whatever, I recommend that you sign up for their newsletters. I know it's another email and you have to delete it, but sign up because that's the way to find out when they're going to have a free weekend. Okay? Most of these companies, when there's a holiday, they will have a free weekend at least for certain records. So Labor Day, there were a lot of like union records or fraternal organization records that were up for free. We're coming up on like Veterans Day, there'll be military records that you can access for free, which means you don't need a subscription, but you'll be able to access them. You find that out from their newsletters or from other Facebook groups or other places that are going to, advertise that, hey, the records are free. How many of you, some of you said you were doing research, how many of you are ready to research in a country outside the United States? Okay, a couple. So when you find a good website for that country, whatever it is, in my case it's Sweden, because that's the only one I've done across the pond, make sure you get their newsletter. Because the good thing about those other countries, if they're going to give a free weekend, it's on their holiday schedule and not ours. So instead of getting a message that says, oh, on the 4th of July, all this stuff is great, and you're like, great, I've got 3 parties to go to. When am I going to research? Right? I don't have any parties on the Swedish midsummer holiday. Well, I might, because sometimes it coincides with 4th of July, but there are other holidays. I don't have parties going on here. So take advantage of those because, anything that's free, anything that's going to give you free research time, that hops on my list. Ancestry was giving out newspapers.com quite often a year ago, but I haven't seen any recently. For webinars, Legacy Tree offers a webinar free at least once a week, usually on Wednesdays. And if you're not there on Wednesday to listen to it, it's free for the next week. Now, if you get really into this and you'll go to Legacy Tree webinars, you will find out that they have thousands of webinars in their library. And as long as you get a subscription to that, you can listen to any of those 1,000 and get all the handouts and everything else. And they're usually in November. Legacy Tree webinars will have a sale and you can get half price memberships, which brings it down to like $25. Pretty reasonable for the amount of education you can get. And most of the research websites also have webinars that you can look at where they will help you to figure out, how do I research military records? How do I research land records? Any of the categories, and sometimes by ethnicities as well. Family Search has some really good webinars that are very short. One of these days, when I get to doing my German, I'm going to take their webinar. I think it's 15 minutes. German for genealogists. Now, what am I going to learn in 15 minutes? The German word for birth, marriage, death, baptism, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. That's enough that when I find a record in German, I'm going to know what I'm looking at. I won't know how to read it, but I'll know whether I got the record I want, the record type that I want, So sometimes even just enough that it goes with a cup of coffee and a little cookie or something, and you get a little bit of information, and that's fine, and you move on. They're not all hour-long things. And, okay, one last quick thing I will give you, because this is in your supplement. One of the first things that people usually end up researching and finding is a census report. right? We just did a census. We all know what it's like. We do it every 10 years. Every 10 years, but not always at the same time. Look at the dates. I don't want you to be looking and going, oh, this can't be the right person. They're only 9 years younger or older from the last census. Who the heck the crazy person was in 1920 who decided we should do the census in January? They didn't live in New England, did they? No, because nobody wants to traipse around New England in January walking on every neighbor's door in the 1920s, right? Had to be somebody from Florida or California. But it doesn't matter. We just need to know that they did it in January. So when we find a 1920 or a 1930 or a 1910 census, we're going to know these people maybe didn't age 10 years. Maybe they only aged 9, maybe they aged 11, depends when their birthday fell, right? I don't want you to discount that it's the wrong person just because their age is off. People didn't keep track of their age. You can ask me how old I am, I have no idea. I can tell you what year I was born, I can do the math, but off the top of my head, I have no idea how old I am. Because there's that number on the calendar and then there's the number I feel like I am, and they never match, right? So I have to think I'm like how I feel, not the number from the calendar. So thank you very much. I hope this has been informative, and I hope you go forth and at least write down the things you know. Because when it dies with you, it's gone. Good chance that nobody else knows the things about your family that you know. So writing down what you know is the most precious gift that you can give your descendants who someday will be out there looking for who was great-great-grandma, great-great-grandpa, and they're going to want to have a story. So leave them a story. Leave them a memento. Yes, sir.
Can I make 2 comments?
As soon as I bring you the microphone, you
I
can.
thought I could hear you, but I was
Well, the camera wants to hear you, though.
camera wants to. Okay. You want to order? All right, fine. First thing is I like the computer and I like photography. And as older folks die in their cellars, we get these boxes of pictures. Where are they going back and forth? So I decided I was going to make a CD of the pictures of my family, my father's family, my mother's family, my wife's family's father, and my whatever I left there. So I sent notes out to the people I knew in these families and said, I'm going to make these CDs, put the pictures I have in there, and if you have anything, I gladly put it in, and if you submit something to me, I'll give you a CD when it's over. Believe me, I got an awful lot of replies, which I thought was wonderful. They go through it. That's the first thing. The other thing has to do with DNA. Pardon me, but I'm a bastard. I took the DNA twice, and both times they said, no, you're not a West, you're not in there. Yet I have 2 cousins who've done extensive work with me. We're the same family, go back, but the DNA, even with recommended, which ones to use, couldn't find me.
Well, I love the idea of the photographs. I'm actually doing that right now. I've digitized a whole lot of photographs, and I'm willing to share the originals now because I don't need them. I'll give them to any cousin who wants them. I actually even got my mother to give me a whole bunch of photographs, so that was kind of cool. I'm going to leave the DNA talk for another day because we could be here for hours talking about that one. Any other questions or comments that people want to ask? I don't know how to tell her to turn the camera off, so we're on camera till we're finished.
My parents were born in Sicily, okay? Now, we don't know the date that they got married, or their church where they were married. Would that have their record of that?
Church records are a great thing to look up for church sacraments. So marriage records you would find,
Yes.
Baptisms you would find. You won't necessarily find a birth record at a church. Now, I mean, you might. I'm not going to say people were never born at church because, babies come when they come. But it wouldn't be a traditional church record. But a marriage you should be able to find in a church record.
Born in Sicily, they got married in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, baptism, marriages, and sometimes deaths you'll see recorded at the church. Yeah,
I know my grandfather was born supposedly November 11th. of 18-something.
Okay, important.
But people say that's really not his date. So how do you find out?
Okay, so you have a lore for a birth date.
Yeah.
And you said 18 something?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think 1896.
Okay. Well, I have a whole nother talk about calendar dates, but that yours is way past the issue of when we changed our calendar from the Julian to the Gregorian, because that's a whole issue, but we'll leave that one too. Gravestone, and if it's not local, look at findagrave.com or billiongraves.com. Okay. Doesn't mean you can read the gravestone, but usually the part on a gravestone would be the year. It's the month and the day that you may not find on a gravestone. I would also want to look at, I would go to the town and see if what the town clerk has on record. I wouldn't want to go to Boston, but I would end up, actually there's a office in Boston for specific to vital records, so you'd want to go to that office and see what they have, because it's long enough ago that it would be in that office. Now, that office actually charges you based on how long you're in there researching. So the best thing is to do as much as you can before you get there, because if you get in and out in 20 minutes, then there's no charge. At least that's how it was when I went a few years ago. But I would want, and then the third option would be newspapers. Especially if you have a month and a date, then at least you know what issue, you're in a short number of issues of a newspaper to look at. But of course, you have to find out from the newspaper, did they do a morning and an afternoon edition? There was, I tried researching in Worcester one time in newspapers, and it was like, oh my God, the morning edition is, 50 pages, and then the afternoon is another 50 pages, and if you don't have the dates, I got seasick looking at the microfilm. Like, there's too much. So, yes.
I was born January 9th, 10th, and the 11th. The reason for the confusion, my mother was not in labor that long. My mother said it was the 10th. My father said it was the 9th, and the doctor put on his sheet the 11th. So I celebrate all days. I expect everybody to call all days. But I can go to the church if I want to, but I don't want to ruin this 3 days.
No, I want a 3-day birthday. Why not? Hey, yeah, records are not always accurate.
I'll take a week.
I actually pulled into the cemetery with my aunt last October. She wanted to go visit her husband's grave. No problem. I drive her over. And I actually had a panic attack as we drove in, because I looked at his headstone and I went, that's awfully clean and shiny. Well, my cousin in that same family, who's also buried in that cemetery, had died 8 months earlier, and the person put her information on the wrong gravestone. So under my aunt's name, it had a date of death, and she's sitting in the car next to me. And it's carved in stone. You cannot trust everything you see and read. We're working to get it fixed, but I mean, talk about, like, I had no idea how she was going to take it. We laugh about it all the time now, but I told her she could be a zombie for Halloween because she came back from the dead.
I have a cute thing. The girl was delivering twins, and one of the twins came before 12 o'clock, and the other one came after 12 o'clock. So for twins, they have two separate.
I have a set of twins. I was kind of wishing for, I forget when they were due, but I was wishing for like 1 month and then the next month even, like not just the midnight, but I wanted it crossing the months of the calendar because I thought it would make for a good story for their lifetime. So, oh, one more.
I had some old papers that my mother left with me, And I knew I had a piece of paper for a grandfather and grandmother. I didn't know exactly what they were. So I found that I had a copy of my grandfather's birth certificate, but on my grandmother, it was her baptism certificate. And in the form where the registrar or whatever filled it out, there was a blank for her birth date on the baptism certificate. So there's another place that makes sure.
Yeah, baptism. I mean, a lot of religions you can look and say, well, they're usually baptized within a couple days, maybe a week. Not all religions do that, but we can hope. Well, thank you again, everybody. I'm sorry we went a little bit over, but I hope it was interesting.